The Bible is a narrative, which means it has a single aim that moves it forward from beginning to middle to end. The Bible also has story authority, meaning it is significant and inviting. People read the Bible differently. How a person reads and interprets the Bible is called hermeneutics, which is the perspective someone takes on the Bible.
Out of the biblical narrative, the Old Testament is based on covenants. There are 5 main covenants that God established with Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David. It all started with creation, and Genesis 1-3 outlines this story. There are many different ways that people understand and interpret Genesis. The main focus of the creation story is that God created the world and gave creation its function and purpose. Adam and Eve were the first humans God created. They eventually disobeyed God by eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God created the first humans with their vocation, and they turned away from it. Humanity failed to realize a possibility of Eden. This was the first covenant made with man.
The next covenant was established with Noah. Humanity turned evil and God was sad with his creation, so he decided to send a flood to destroy the world. God finds favor with Noah, which means that he has grace on Noah. Then the next step in the story is Noah's integrity. The final part of the story was the instructions for saving humankind, the building of the ark. These steps demonstrate that grace generates integrity and faithfulness. The covenant with Noah is a recreational covenant.
Another covenant that was established in the Old Testament was with Abram. There was no evidence of God and Abram having a relationship until God tells Abram to leave everything and go to the promised land of Canaan. Abram obeys God and creates a covenant with him that God will make his offspring as numerous as the stars in the sky. God changed Abram's name to Abraham because of the promised covenant. His name used to mean exalted father, and now his changed name means father of multitudes.
The next covenant God made was with Moses. Moses was used as God's ambassador to bring the people out of slavery from Egypt. He chose Moses since he was an educated Israelite that was raised by the Egyptian princess. The Exodus was a significant part of Israel's history because these people were in an impossible situation and God came and delivered them. It made it possible for the complete fulfillment of the covenant with Abraham. It made it possible for the creation of Israel as a country. God chose to be identified by this particular event because it shows that God rescues his people. It is also a vital aspect of the Christian faith because if we are to understand our faith and salvation, it is important to understand the Exodus because it is a part of redemption. The law was also given to the Israelites through Moses. The law provided the sinful people with an idea of God's profile and what he defined as good.
The next part in the story of the Old Testament comes to the cycle of Judges. The time of the Judges was a recurring pattern of disloyalty to God followed by oppression from their enemies. Then Israel would cry out to God and he would answer through providing Israel with judges, which were men that God appointed to rule and be the Israelites' deliverers. There would be a military victory and Israel would obey God again. A little while later, Israel would fall back into disobedience and the cycle would restart.
Following the period of the Judges was the monarchy with the rule of the kings. The king of Israel was to be God's choice. The first king was Saul, the anointed one, but King Saul did not work out. Next was King David, which is important because the final covenant that God makes in the Old Testament is with David. King David was significant since the Bible describes him as a man after God's own heart. In the Davidic covenant, God promises that the throne of his kingdom will last forever. Also, part of the promise is that someone of David's line will build the temple, which comes true when David's son, King Solomon, builds the temple.
Eventually, Israel splits and becomes a divided monarchy. The northern kingdom is Israel, and the southern kingdom is Judah, which has the city of Jerusalem. Prophets such as Elijah were sent by God to warn the people of the consequences of their behavior. 200 years after the monarchy divided, Israel was destroyed by the Assyrians in the year 722. Later, in 587, the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah by destroying the temple and exiling the people.
God sent some prophets to his people before and during the exile. Some of these prophets were Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Isaiah. Jeremiah's main message was about doom. Ezekiel focused on hope, and Isaiah mainly prophesied about the people's return. The Babylonians conquered Judah, but eventually the Persians under Cyrus the Great dominated the Babylonians. In 538, after Cyrus and the Persians took over, Cyrus issued a decree called the Edict of Cyrus, saying that the Israelites could return to their land.
The return brought about the time of the Second Temple Judaism since Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple. Another major figure in the people's return was Ezra, who was a priestly scribe that knew the law of Moses. The last major figure was Nehemiah, who was the governor and leader of the people. The people rejoiced about the return as it is described in some of the Psalms, but the people also mourned since they were still under the control of others. The covenant to David about his line being on the throne forever caused the people this sadness because this covenant still had not been fully fulfilled. But the story is not finished with the Old Testament because the New Testament continues God's story about his people and the fulfillments of the covenants.